Hi, in today's video, I'm going to be talking more about double pointed needles and why I love them so much. Hello, and welcome back to the Knitflix Explorer. My name is Nelsa Pereira. Today I'm going to talk about double pointed needles, also known as DPNs. What are they? Why do you need them? And why do I find them the most important knitting tool in my knitting arsenal? So please join me in today's video where you can find out more about double pointed needles. They look like these. You normally get them in a set of 5. The idea is that you knit with 4 of them and knit with 1 of them in the round. And later on in this video, I will show you exactly how I'm going to cast on with 4 double pointed needles, 3 with stitches on and 1 that's going to be working in the round. And that way you know how I cast on for double pointed needles if you've never done it before. I normally use wooden ones because they are grippier. They grip the yarn better, especially if you got slippery yarn. They feel better on the hands. Now, my favorite knitting needles are Knit Pro's double pointed needles. They're called cubics. I'll show you what they look like. These are 8 inches, which is also 20 centimeters. And they look like a little cube. I don't know if you can see them, they're little cubes. But knitting with these, they feel like knitting like you were knitting with butter. They just slide through the yarn so well. They hold on to the yarn so well. And they're like something that I love. A bit more expensive than the ones I showed you earlier. I think I got these on Amazon. They weren't very expensive, and I got a whole variety of them. These are 5 millimeters, these are 4.5 millimeters, and I've got them in all different thicknesses. So starting from 2 millimeters all the way to, I think, 7 or 8 millimeters, and you get 5 of them. So I've got a lot of double pointed needles, but the yarn calls for double pointed needles. If you're starting off in your double pointed journey, I would say use wooden needles because they're the easiest for you to start off with. If you're knitting really fast and you are happy to start using metal needles, then absolutely fine. That's also very good. I knit with metal needles quite a lot, but sometimes the yarn can be quite slippery. So I do prefer the wooden ones, but it's up to you, whatever you feel comfortable with. Why do we use double pointed needles, you say? Well, first of all, I normally use them, and we normally use them in the knitting world, is to knit smaller pieces. So if you're knitting in the round, a smaller size, you want to knit with the 3 needles. And I have got the project I'm going to show you how to get these on the needles later on, but this is what they really look like when you cast on. You have a small number of stitches and on the 3 needles, 1, 2, and 3. And as you can see, the project is small. It's for my fingerless mittens, and the fingerless mitten is this one. And you can see the little holes, very small. You can use the circular needles, but you have to use very small circular needles. I have never loved the tiny little circular needles because you still have a needle on either side. So I prefer the double pointed needles. So the reasons why you need to use double pointed needles is because you're working with smaller projects. Those could include, like I showed you, my fingerless mittens. So if you're doing fingerless mittens, if you're doing gloves, especially when you're getting to the little fingers, they're so easy if you're using double pointed needles. You could also use them for socks. Predominantly, I use them for socks. I will use double pointed needles, but people use the circular needle in a magic loop method, which is something I don't use and I'm not going to talk about in this video, but you can check it out in other places if you want to know how the magic loop methods work. I'm sure a lot of people love them. I just don't use them very much. The other thing is, if you are knitting toys, a lot of stuff in the toy is knitting around and it's very small. And I'll show you one small thing, and it's very pretty. It's the pattern's called The Good Bear by Susan B. Anderson. and this little guy was knit in the round for everything. So everything on here, his clothes, his whole body, his body, his little pantaloons, everything was knit in the round in double pointed needles, his little arms and legs, and they're all one. This whole body is one piece. The whole body is one piece, and then the jumper and the pants are knit separately, and they're also knit in double pointed needles. So if you can use double pointed needles, and if you learn how to use double pointed needles, your world of knitting expands quite a bit. So there's many things you can knit with double pointed needles. So that's why I do love using them quite a lot. In fact, sometimes when your project gets really big, you then have to change up to either bigger needles, or you can knit with a circular needle, at which point I think, oh no, I don't want to give up my double points. But when it gets really big, because some projects, they start really small, and as they get really big, you don't want it to fall off the end of your needle. So when you get too many stitches on a needle, you want to then switch up to a circular needle. That said, we have different sizes of double pointed needles. You get double pointed needles in variety of sizes. You get them in 6 inches, 8 inches, 12 inches, 14 inches, and so on. I, however, normally use the 8 inches. I do not have 20. These are 8 inches. I don't think I own 20 inches. I find them too long. And the other thing is that the longer you get, the more complicated you get when needles are dangling around. Now, if you look at this piece, you can see that when you're knitting, and I'll just give you a quick demonstration on here. When you start knitting, you will put your needle in there, and when you start knitting, the other stitches just dangle around. You don't actually notice the other needles are there. When you start, and I'll show you here, you can see all the needles are on there. There's 3 of them, all the stitches. There's 40 stitches in this, and they're all dangling there. And with the 4th needle, I'm going to be using to knit this. They're pretty stable. The only thing is, if you've got 20-inch needles, it gets pretty long and more complicated. And if you're a beginner, I would say definitely not. I don't normally use 20. I don't even own a set of 20-inch needles. But if I did, I'd find there'll be just a lot of needles in my way, and I don't really want that. So when it gets to that stage, I will swap to circular needles. It's up to you and your personal choice what you're comfortable with. Some people, of course, use it. I personally don't. The other thing you will notice is when you're working with circular needles, I've put a stitch marker on the first round to denote that's the first round. You can see that little star dangling there. I think it's on there after 2 stitches. You can put it after 1 stitches, 2 stitches, or how many stitches you need to, just to know that that's your first needle. Because what happens when you're going round and round and round and round, you might forget it. Your pattern might say you need to knit for 1 inch. When you get to your 1 inch or 2 inches, you need to know where to stop. And you know this, you should stop on this needle because this is your first needle. So this should be your last needle, and that's where you stop. You don't want to have it lopsided. So that's why you need a stitch marker on the first round. Sometimes you might not just stop at 1. You might be going for, if you're doing a jumper in circular needles, for example, you will go on for a long time. Or if you're doing a sock, you will go on for a long time. You do need to know where your stitch marker is. So I would say definitely something you need to make sure is you put your stitch marker on the first needle, so you know where to start, where your beginning and end is. Video today, I will show you the technique on how you can do it so it's a bit loose for you, even if you're beginning, and if you haven't done it this way, at least you'll learn a new way of doing it. You might already know it, of course. So you could learn how to cast on, even as a new knitter, a little bit looser and in a way that's not as stressful as I found my original journey. Right, here we go. So we got our yarn. This is acrylic yarn that I'm going to be using for the fingerless mittens. As you can see, it's baby pink, and this is going to form the cuff of my fingerless mittens. So the first thing I want to do is, in my pattern, I call for you to cast on 40 stitches. In the pattern, I say you need to cast on with 2 needles held together. Now, I normally use the long tail cast on method. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my 2 double pointed needles, and these are 4 millimeters thick, and you might be able to see the 4 millimeter mark there. It's 4 millimeters thick and it's 8 inches. That's about 20 centimeters in length. And that seems to give me the perfect amount of stitches I need for what I'm using and for this fingerless mitten. This is how I cast on for my fingerless mittens. I will take the 2 yarn together and I will leave a little space there, and I will measure to get 40. So I will spin this round 40 times. I've got 3 there for 20, 30, 40. So I've got 40 rounds on there. This is not me casting on, this is just measuring. And I will give myself some room at the end. So I'm going to hold on to this and take off that extra yarn from the needle. So I've got this. I'm going to make my little knot here, which is, in case you're wondering how to do that, circle it round and put it through there. And you've made a little lake, call it a lake. I think I heard it from one of the knitwear designers, I'm not really sure, a little knot. And you can see it's flexible, this knot can open and close, but I'm going to close it tight to these needles. There you go, nice and neat, and 2 of them, right? So I've got the 2 needles, I've got my little knot on the 2 needles, as you can see, and I'm going to start casting on. This is a long tail cast on, and I'm going to count that first knot as stitch number 1, and this will be stitch number 2, and I will continue going till I get to 40 stitches. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 10. You can see they're pretty even. 10 stitches, and I'll keep going. 11, okay, so I have now got to 40 stitches on these 2 needles. Right, so now what I'm going to do with these 40 stitches, now that I've got the 40 stitches on, I'm going to carefully remove one of the needles so that I'm only left with 1 needle. So I'm gently going to pull one of them out, making sure that the stitches don't fall off the first needle. Now you can see this has become really loose, and you do need that, because not only when you're putting your mitten on, you would want to make sure that this bit is loose, but it also, if you're a beginner knitter, you would want to make sure that you can cast on without it being too tight. That used to be my mistake when I was first learning how to use double pointed needles. My cast on was too tight and it didn't slide on the needle like this one does. But I have to be careful that it doesn't slide off the needle. Now, I do have quite a bit of yarn left over. I don't normally have this much, but it's fine. We can cut it off and we'll be using that later. So now we've got our stitches. I'm now going to teach you how you're going to put these stitches onto 3 needles. For my pattern, I need 40 stitches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have 1 needle with 12 stitches and the other needle with 14 each. So on needle number 1, on needle number 2 now, I'm going to carefully slip 12 stitches on here. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And I'm going to carefully just put them in the middle, just like that. And I'm going to take my other needle, which is right there, and I'm going to put 14 stitches on this needle now. So that, and as you can see, I'm trying to keep everything really still. And if you can do that on your lap or something like a table, that would be good. So that's 1, 2, 13 and 14, and I'll push them to the middle and I'll just make sure, I'll just count, there's 14 on here. That's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Yes, there's 14. So now we've got all the 3 stitches onto the 3 needles. I'm going to try and make a triangle with them. I'm going to keep them on the table, and I've made a triangle. And as you can see, not only have I made the triangle, I'm also making sure that they're not twisted. So stitches are not like this. All of them are at the bottom and not twisted, and all at the middle of the needle. Just make sure they're all in the middle. So you can see there's needles on either side. But now that that's done, I need to join it in the round. So this needle, which is now spare, which has this needle now needs to be connected to this needle here. And this is why we need to join them in the round. So the next thing I need to do is bring them close together, like they're going to get married soon. I'm going to pull the yarn so it's nice and tight. It's not loose or anything. And if you can see, I just kind of pushed my fingers in that direction just to keep them all together. Do whatever it takes to make sure your fingers get in a position that you can knit. So put them all together like that. I have them like this. And I'll move this closer to the working side. So now I'm going to work with that. I will take my my 4th needle, and I'm going to start knitting. Now the pattern calls for knit 1, purl 1. So if you're learning, I would just say knit everything. But because my pattern calls for knit 1, purl 1, I'm going to knit 1, purl 1. So as you can see, I hold the yarn like this. You don't have to hold the yarn like that, but I do. I don't know where I learned that from, but I learned it from somewhere. And I make the first stitch. As soon as I do that stitch, I will pull everything tight. I'll pull that, I'll pull that, I'll pull the extra yarn, I'll pull that tight. And I'll make sure that this needle is close to this needle. All 3 needles here, this, and this are close together. So they're all very close. I can see they're close. And now I'm going to do the purl bit. So I will purl that. And as I'm doing that, as I do each stitch, I will still pull a little bit just to make sure they're all close together. So I pull and pull, and I'll do the next, which is a knit. So I'll put my yarn there, and I'm going to purl the next one. So I'm going to turn that over and purl. Now at this point, you could actually just drop everything and pretend you're working on 2 needles like you do normally, and just pretend that you haven't got those other 2 needles dangling around. It doesn't matter. It's only when we come to the end, I'll just show you for this first round to make sure that the first round isn't twisted. So I'm just doing my knit and purl till we get to the end. I'm going a bit faster so you don't get too bored. Okay, so I got to the top, and you can see the other 2 dangling away, but it's fine, it's not a problem. And I finished on that needle. That was a purl. Remember, it's a purl if you're going to do knit and purl. And I moved this into the knit position for my next needle. Now I've taken that other needle that's now become spare. I'll move this to the middle. So these stitches are in the middle, and I'm ready to work with the next needle. I will slide this into position, and I will put the needle that just became free on there. I will take the working yarn and do my knit stitch. Right, now as soon as I do the first stitch, pull it tight so they're next to each other, nice and tight. You probably can't see that on the video, but I give that a bit of a tug. I gave that a tug. I'll move it into purl position, and I will continue all the way around, just making sure that I drop the other needles, pretend they don't exist. They will not fall off your needles because they're in the middle, and wooden needles are pretty grippy, so you shouldn't have a problem. To the end of this one, don't forget there's 14 on this needle, so it takes a little bit longer. Right, so we're getting to the end, and that's a purl, and that's why I know it's right, because I've made sure that I purl the last stitch. It's just so much easier when I'm going to the next. So I put this back into the knit position because I'm going to knit next, and I am going to take my, now this one's become a spare needle, and I'm going to turn my work around, and I'm going to get this ready, move this to the middle, and I'm going to get this ready to work with. So I'm going to move that to the front. This is the first, this is the last needle that I'm going to be working with, and I'm going to pretend the other two needles don't exist. And don't forget, give it that little tug at the beginning couple of stitches, just so that you keep your little rounds nice and neat. So give them all a little bit of a tug, and then you could continue knitting as normal without pulling on the tension too much. And if you do it this way, especially because I knit very tight, using the double pointed, using the two needles to cast on just makes my first stitches that I'm working with easier to knit with when I start working in the round. Right, so I have done my stitches, and because I gave it a tug earlier, I think it's a bit tight, so I'm going to loosen that up a bit. Happens to the best of us, unfortunately. Right, so I got that one, and I'm purling the last stitch. Might be a little bit of a fiddle to start off with, but don't worry about that. Right, I have got that on there, and what I'm going to do now, I'm going to move them all in the middle so you can see, and there's a little bit of yarn there, don't worry about that. I'm going to pull this yarn, I'm going to pull this yarn, and I'm just going to tighten everything up. If there is yarn extra like I have here, it's fine. Not only is it going to close, but when you're going to sew this up later on, you could sew that close, so it's fine. It's not a big deal at the moment. Now when I finish the first round, I'm going to, now I know that's my first round because I've got my little extra yarn here, so I know that's the first needle. If you forget to put your stitch marker, you know it's at the beginning here, so you shouldn't have a problem if you've forgotten to put your stitch marker. But I haven't forgotten, so I'm going to put my stitch marker now. I normally do it after 2 stitches, especially if I'm doing a knit 1 purl 1 rib. So I'll do knit 1, and don't forget, we're going to make it nice and tight, right about there, nice and tight. And then I'm going to purl, keeping your tension tight for this one, and making sure that you're using the right yarn and not your extra yarn. Right, so done 1 knit 1 purl. I'm going to put my stitch marker here, and I'm going to continue knitting, purling all the way around. And when I finish this needle, I will just give you a little view of what the work looks like so far. Right, so I'm getting to the end of this part. Okay, I got to the end, looks good. Drop my needle down. For your benefit, I'm just going to push all the needles in the front, and so you can see what we've done so far. We have got our work all on the 3 needles, in my eyes quite effortlessly. Doing this on video is not the same as just doing it without recording it. Right, so they're all there, and if I turn the work around, and if you look, everything looks neat and tidy. It's all in the round. You can't really see it because the work is quite at the early stages, but it should actually look like this. So this is what I have made on my first fingerless mittens. I haven't yet done the thumb. I will do that in a bit. I might show you how I'm doing the thumb, but as you can see, it's a pretty good edge. It's probably where I sewed them together. But yeah, that's your knit 1 purl 1, and that's what it should look like when you start off with. So that is how you start casting on for the knit 1 purl 1 cast on, and that is with two needles held together at the beginning so that you get a nice loose stitches to work with. Now I'll just talk about a little story of mine for when I first started knitting with double pointed needles. When I started knitting, I learned how to use double pointed needles, and I think it was Susan B. Anderson that one of her videos that I learned the technique from, and I was knitting the giraffe, one of Susan B. Anderson's giraffes, and that's the first time I learned how to knit with double pointed needles. And it was really difficult. I found that everything was extremely tight. My knitting was very tight. And when I cast on, I did not cast on in the way I show you in this video. I cast on, say if you're casting on 30 stitches and you put 10, 10 and 10 on each of those needles. Bring the needles back up again. If you're putting 10, 10 and 10 on each of the needles, I cast on one needle, and then I cast on, then really struggled to cast on and add the second needle, and then really struggled and cast on the third needle, 10 stitches. And that's how you can do it, and that's how I was originally taught. However, I found out that if you cast all on one needle and then you distribute them between the 3 needles, it's a lot easier and a lot less stressful. Let's just say there was a lot of effing and blinding when I first started. That was one of the problems, that it was difficult to immediately cast on 3 stitches. So it's easier to just cast on the 1 stitches and distribute it on the 3 needles. The other thing is, when I was first learning, everything was so tight. As it is, my knitting, my tension in my knitting is tight. But when I was learning, it was even tighter. So as I was trying to get into my stitches, I found it nigh on impossible to do that using double pointed needles. And that is why I love them so much. I will seek out toys. I don't knit many socks. I do knit a lot of fingerless mittens. So I will seek out projects that are either fingerless mittens or toys to knit, because I just love them. And toys don't always have to be ones you can give away. Of course, you can keep them if you want to, because I'm very tempted with this guy. I don't want to give him away yet. So yeah, that's why I like to use double pointed needles. They're just so much easier. And the other reason I like to use double pointed needles is because when I'm traveling, it's just easier to take a smaller project. Still be able to knit. 9 times out of 10, it's a wooden needle, so I kind of hide it in my hand luggage, and I can pass through security with it. If not, put them in your suitcase, and then you can still use them on the other side wherever you get to. So I think double pointed needles are really good for small projects. You don't want to take balls and balls of yarn with you when you're traveling, especially when you're on holiday, like loads of these. If you're going to be knitting a lot, you don't want to take too many, because your project's going to get heavier and heavier. But with a smaller project, you can knit a few of these and pack them back ready for you when you come back home. So that is why I prefer using double pointed needles as well. And I hope that you like using double pointed needles as much as I like using double pointed needles. I hope you enjoy your journey. If you're starting off using double pointed needles, if you are in the middle of using double pointed needles and learn a new technique in this video, and if you're continuing the journey, I hope you have double pointed needles as much as I do. Thank you so much for joining me at the Knitflix Explorer. I hope you enjoy learning to use double pointed needles if you've never done so before. And if you have done so before, I hope you've learned a new technique of casting on in today's video. And if you are just a regular knitter like me on double pointed needles, happy knitting. Thank you and goodbye. Don't forget to like, subscribe.